Hey guys, I hope I got everything in here. I kind of made my own file to get together. If I did miss something, just please let me know, and I can just make a short other video to add it if needed. But I think I got most of it. Like I said, it might be a little all over the place, but it should have pretty much everything in here. If I forget, like I said, if I forget something, just please let me know. So starting with chapter one, didn't have a lot of notes. North Dakota chapter one was all about the Bakken Range and the Williston Basin. So the Williston Basin really started to form um, during prehistoric North Dakota. Remember, in this area, a giant ocean was covered this area and made the ground sink. And really, what it did is that pressure caused the ground to sink and really eventually form oil and coal. As it says here, those ancient animals that lived there, um, they form that oil. Remember, you need certain conditions to form a fossil fuel. You need friction or heat, you need pressure, and really you need time, millions of years to form that. So the prehistoric era in North Dakota, the age of the dinosaurs, as it says, the mosasaur was the most common. If you want to go back and look at the video, you can. But it was a type of dinosaur. Other common dinosaurs, Triceratops, lots of Triceratops fossils have been found. And then, as it says here, one of the more popular attractions in North Dakota to visit and find out more about dinosaurs is the Dakota Dinosaur Museum in Dickinson. So the Cenozoic era really was important for Lake Agassiz. It is the most recent area. I don't know if it's the most important for Lake Agassiz because it is the most important or the most recent. But Lake Agassiz was that huge ancient lake that covered mostly Canada, as you can see here. But that sliver really runs into North Dakota and really essentially created um, the Red River Valley. So as it says here, dinosaurs died out during the tertiary period of the Cenozoic era, and mammals showed up. So various mammals there. Ancient camels. North Dakota used to have ancient camels. The Quaternary period, or the Ice Age, glaciers covered North Dakota, and the last glacier right here, the Wisconsinian Glacier, melted and really formed Lake Agassiz. Many theories of what happens to the water. Many think that Lake of the Woods was the drainage, and then where was the border of Lake of the Woods would have been right here. Now that's the theory. It's not fact. It's theory, and there's a difference. Um, the next thing I don't think I'm forgetting anything. Like I said, I'm going to skip around just based off of this. Maybe I can. Let's see if I can find here. Let's go chapter 4, wildlife. Like I said, if I missed something, just please let me know. So in North Dakota, let's see if I got everything here. In North Dakota, the wildlife in North Dakota, starting with big game animals, you have whitetails, mule deer. Remember, this test was our picture test. You could possibly have pictures of any of these animals that are found in your notes on your picture test. So whitetail deer, mule deer, elk, moose. If you don't know what they look like, go ahead and look them up. Waterfowl, you have mallards, which is probably the most popular duck in North Dakota. It is the most popular duck in North Dakota. Canadian geese, and then you have various number of ducks right here. There's also a couple different geese, speckled bellies, and snow geese are also in North Dakota. Fur-bearing animals, so coyotes, red fox, mountain lions, raccoons, muskrats, beavers, and I'm probably forgetting a bunch. Bobcats would be another one in North Dakota. So any of these would be fair game on your test. Pay attention to your pictures. Early Native Americans have a little more information here. The first people in North Dakota were called the Paleo Indians. And those Paleo Indians, the reason this picture is on there is the Paleo Indians. This is the way they hunted ancient mammoths, as they would drive them off a cliff and injure them and then be able to get them for food. Next You have the archaic people, and really the next semi-modern people was the woodland people, lived in the river valleys. Um, there's a lot of evidence of the woodland people, very little evidence of any Paleo Indians. The Mandan were the first modern tribe. That's important. They're the first modern tribe in North Dakota that we know of. They were thought to be in North Dakota about that 900 AD era. And then the Mandan eventually formed the three affiliated tribes with the Mandan Hidatsa and the Arikara. Um, lived together because of the one disease that really hurt them all, smallpox. La Vérendrye, so the first European in North Dakota, first European to visit. Very important to remember. Let's see, missed one. So the Hidatsa and the Arikara, you don't have to worry about what they called themselves. Just know that they were devastated by smallpox, and that's important to know about all tribes. The Chippewa were in northeast North Dakota. They moved. They didn't live in North Dakota for a long time, but they were a dominant tribe, so we cover them. They moved to the area of the Turtle Mountains, so like up by the city or the town of Belcourt would have been their era. They were a lot like the eastern tribes, and they were okay because in northeast North Dakota, it was very unique in that it had a lot of trees, whereas in most other places in North Dakota you didn't have those. The Métis, remember the Métis built the Red River Cart, and they saw a future in business. They didn't really belong. Remember, a Métis was typically a French fur trapper, and a Native American woman having a child together, and that was a Métis, and they really just didn't fit in anywhere, except for when they find this this niche where they hauled those buffalo skins or buffalo robes to St. Paul to sell them, and they were kind of the traders. So the Sioux, you had three groups of Sioux. You had La, Na, and Da. So you had the Lakota, Nakota, and Dakota. But the Teton Sioux were the largest group. They had about 12,000 people. Probably the most famous Lakota is a man by the name of Sitting Bull. Remember, he was one of the leaders at the Battle of Little Bighorn with Custer. The Great Sioux Nation, as we said, La Na Da, they were the largest, most dominant tribe in North Dakota, and here's their structure. As I said, they believed in one God, Wankataka, and Taiyospe was their family group. That's important to know. Next, fur trade era. So the visit of La Vérendrye, he's the first non-Native American to visit North Dakota. He's a French guy, and he visited, took an expedition into North Dakota from the northeast, entered around Pembina, and really he encountered the Mandan villages in 1738. They're not sure what villages he visited, as it says here, but they think it was one just outside of Bismarck, around Menoken, North Dakota. David Thompson made the first map of North Dakota, or maps. Lewis and Clark obviously know the importance of Lewis and Clark. They were the first to really come through North Dakota for exploration purposes. They spent the winter with a Mandan, and everybody knows the story of Sakakawea and how they helped Sakakawea helped them survive. Trading post. He did a project on this. Hudson Bay Company. Really, Fort or Manuel Issa was the guy that really started to do the trading posts along the Missouri River, and that was important. Colonel Henry Atkinson secured that area, so they were allowed to have trading posts. You have the various trading posts. I'm not too worried that you know this, where they actually were. A trading post is really mainly to trade fur. It's to trade fur. Later on, it's buffalo, but originally, really, beaver was the main fur that everybody was after. Excuse me. Next, conflict on the plains. You have the Minnesota Uprising. That's important to remember, Chief Little Crow got fed up with the government because they kept changing what they were doing with their treaties. He went on a rampage with his tribe, or with his people, with his warriors, and killed over 350 white settlers. And the U.S. Army was, obviously sent to put down the Minnesota Uprising. So, let's go back to that. The Minnesota, actually, we don't have to. The Dakota conflict, as it says, during the Dakota conflict, when Chief Little Crow and his warriors were chased in North Dakota, 300 of them were captured. There was a military tribunal, which is basically court, and they were all sentenced to death. And one of the priests on one of the missionaries or missions in Minnesota begged Abraham Lincoln to not execute all these people, but 38 were executed at the same time. It was the largest public execution in U.S. history. So Sibley and Sully expeditions chased after the Dakotas, the ones that fled into North Dakota. And the real important part about this is Sibley, Henry Sibley, entered North Dakota at Sargent County. That he marched north, but he entered by a place called Lake Tawakon. Excuse me. And that's important to remember simply because, it's close to home. So if you look at some of the different battles they fought in, Sibley and Sully engaged the Sioux at multiple different places. So really, the Battle of Killdeer Mountain was one of the more important battles. Remember that Sully really routed the Sioux at the Battle of Killdeer Mountain. Some of our military forts here that were around the country, and you can kind of see the reservations that were created. Right here, you have the different reservations. Laramie Treaty is important. Remember, it planned to give the Great Sioux Nation, 22 million acres in 3 different states: southern North Dakota, in Nebraska. But the problem was gold was discovered in the Black Hills, and really all that once it went out the window because settlers started going into the Black Hills. The government was forced to protect them, and the Laramie Treaty was essentially dead. So the Laramie Treaty, really what it did is it forced Native Americans into they went on a buffalo hunt in Montana, and the government chased after them. So just in the background, now that this is the Custer House, that in 1876, Custer set out to find these Native Americans in Montana. The conflict happened at the Little Bighorn River, and his 7th Cavalry was essentially wiped out. Remember the blank slide with Wounded Knee? You were supposed to listen about it. Wounded Knee was the last stand by the Native Americans in South Dakota at Pine Ridge. And basically they came up with this dance that said the white people would leave their land to the Native Americans, and it didn't work. And what ended up happening is a bunch of women and children were massacred in 1899, and it was essentially the end of the Native American era of North Dakota, or just the Dakotas. Next, let's see here. I think Iron Road is next. So the Iron Road and the trains coming in North Dakota, you had the Northern Pacific. Remember, Jay Cooke sold bonds. Didn't work out for him, and eventually Frederick J. Billings actually took over the railroad and finished it in North Dakota. So Jay Cooke sold bonds, didn't sell enough, and the Northern Pacific could not build through North Dakota. The Great Northern, and remember this should say Great Northern, not NP. James J. Hill, a lot of problems were gotten rid of because James J. Hill owned it, and he he paved the way through North Dakota. The Sioux line was a smaller one. Remember, they had 2 lines really to carry like grains to North Dakota and back from Chicago and Minneapolis. Settling North Dakota. These are important. They're recent. We just had them on the last test. Homestead Act, Timber Culture Act, Preemption Act. Remember, preemption was you had to pay a little bit. Homestead Act, you had to settle there for 5 years. Timber Culture Act, you had to plant trees. Settlement patterns. So remember, in this area of North Dakota, mainly Germans and Germans from Russia. And then places to the east typically had more Scandinavian. And then there's some British settlement in Dickey and Sargent counties also because of the ranching that went on. The last slide here, Life of Dakota Settler, the sod house. One of the real threats was prairie fires, and the boom, and the free land boom really essentially ended in the early 1900s in North Dakota because most of the free land was gone at that point. Let me check here. I don't think this is something of relevance. We already talked about all the Native American tribes. Lost Town Project, I'm not really worried about. It was a project. Just a couple other things. Remember from our Bismarck trip, our different legislators, and also our governor and lieutenant governor. Remember the places that we went. We went to the Heritage Center, the Bismarck Capitol Tour, the Custer House, and the Mandan Indian villages. All will be on your test. Nothing about the gift shop though. And I think that about does it. Like I said, if I missed something, please let me know. And I can make another short video to cover it. So have a good night, guys, and good